Welcome to the March 2015 edition of the SYCL 360 podcast. In this podcast, we have three excellent presentations to share with you. The first will be an interview of Dr. James Nichols by Deb French. Dr. Jim Nichols is the current chair of the Professional Practice in Clinical Chemistry course that will be held this spring. They will be discussing the course and its goals, and I encourage you, if at all possible, to attend. Next, Joel Corey will be interviewing Dr. Catherine Hammett-Stabler to discuss the AACC's response to the proposed changes in the FDA's oversight of laboratory-developed tests. And finally, I'll be interviewing Dr. Chris McCudden to discuss the changes in the AACC's Informatics Division.
In this podcast section, we would like to give SYCL members some information about the AACC Professional Practice in Clinical Chemistry course that will be held in Philadelphia from April 26th through 30th this year. In order to do this, we have asked Dr. Jim Nichols, the chair of the organising committee, to speak to us today. Dr. Nichols, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for the invitation.
So, would you like to tell us a little bit about the Professional Practice in Clinical Chemistry course?
Sure. It's geared for all sorts of people who are interested in the laboratory and clinical chemistry, from those who work in industry, both in research, sales, marketing, even in regulatory, to those who are actively engaged in the clinical laboratories, both as students, medtech, all the way through fellows and clinical fellows, and those who have been in the practice for several years who want a refresher, as well as someone who is intending to maybe cover a different area of the laboratory that they are not currently in charge of. So what we will be covering really is an overview of clinical chemistry, the core discipline of the breadth of what we care for from all different types of patients, both pediatric all the way through adults and geriatric patients, the critically ill, trauma patients, cancer, and general preventative health. We also hope to cover a number of methodology, and of course the overall view is from a best practice viewpoint.
Wow, that definitely sounds all-encompassing. So what do you hope that people gain from attending this course?
Sure. So each of the individual classes or lectures will be rather brief. It will cover a particular discipline, and we'll look at best practices, and it will be case-oriented. So we want to bring in a case, real-world example of clinical chemistry in practice, and talk about the controversies as well as the methodologies with that discipline. So, you know, we're really covering from cradle to grave, and we're looking at preterm, fetal development and testing just after birth, all the way through pediatrics and into adult and then geriatric medicine.
Wow, that's a lot. So is there anything different about the course this year compared to previous years?
Yes, we've changed up the format. I think before it was mostly lecture. We're now trying to make it interactive so that it will be in a more discussive type of format. And then we, of course, have incorporated the cases, the best practice guidelines, and controversies with each of the talks. So every talk will focus on a case, a controversy, the methodology, and then, of course, the best practices.
Wonderful. That sounds like people will get a lot out of that. Does the course focus only on the basics, or is there more evolving areas of lab medicine covered as well?
No, we're going to be covering some of the latest controversies, clearly from laboratory-developed tests to molecular testing and diagnostics and infectious disease, all the way to some of the areas that may not be traditional in the clinical chemistry world, like hemoglobin variant analysis, coag testing, and of course we're going to be covering point of care as well as some of the future of quality control and management practices, looking at laboratory design and that into the future.
That sounds wonderful. Is there anything else that you would like to tell us, SYCL members, about this course?
Yeah, I am excited about the format. I think that the organizing committee has done a great job of pulling this together, and I really would welcome you to attend. We are looking forward to having an interactive session with all of our attendees, and there will be opportunity for networking. So we'll have some evening sessions, and we'll focus on some laboratory calculations and some fun activities as well throughout the 4.5-day course.
Great. Well, I would just like to thank Dr. Jim Nichols for taking some time to discuss the Professional Practice in Clinical Chemistry course with us today. It's definitely been a very informative discussion.
Great, and I hope to see all of you at the course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On October 3, 2014, the FDA released draft guidance documents entitled Framework for Regulatory Oversight of Laboratory-Developed Tests and FDA Notification and Medical Device Reporting for Laboratory-Developed Tests, and recently held a public workshop on January 8th and 9th this year. The purpose of this workshop was to discuss FDA's proposal for a risk-based framework for addressing the regulatory oversight of a subset of in vitro diagnostic devices, referred to as laboratory-developed tests or LDTs. These are intended for clinical use and designed, manufactured, and used within a single laboratory, and the workshop provided an additional opportunity for public comment. I am joined today by Dr. Catherine Hammett-Stabler, Professor of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine at the University of North Carolina, who attended the workshop to present AACC's perspective on the proposals. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, Joe. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thanks, and thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
So what do these recent developments mean for the future of LDT oversight?
Well, I think that's the million-dollar question right now. If one reads the FDA's draft documents or guidance documents, you'll see that everything tends to be risk-based. There are a number of other stipulations and criteria that are buried within the documents. And I think we have to be prepared for just about anything. I think if we look at many of our tests with respect to risk only that are LDTs, then any of us could argue that some of the most common ones could, in fact, be heavily regulated in the future. I think a lot of our members, from having had conversations with them, think that the FDA tends to focus predominantly on molecular diagnostics or companion diagnostics, but I don't think we can assume that. I think that things that we often take for granted as being able to do could, in fact, come under very stringent regulations where many of us would find ourselves in a position of having to prepare and submit the equivalence of a 510K or a PMA and type of document, and then wait to obtain essentially FDA approval on the many of the tests that we perform.
And what is AACC's position on these documents?
We do believe that the FDA's intentions are in line with our own philosophies, and that they're concerned about providing or assuring that patient care is not compromised in any way, shape, or form through the provision or conduction of a laboratory-developed test. But we do have some strong concerns, And our comments and our responses to the FDA's draft guidance documents can be found on the AACC website. If one goes in and looks under areas of interest on the front, on the opening page, and if you go down to governmental affairs and regulatory affairs, you will see this, and click on that, you'll see the responses in full.
Great. So what is the expected timeline for implementation of these new risk-based strategy and guidelines?
It is a phased-in type of timeline for implementation, with some of the activities taking place once this all becomes approved, of course, with some of the initial requirements to collect additional data regarding what LDTs each of us are performing, being assembled within the next couple of years to several years, up to 9 for the full implementation of the project.
Okay, and then how should we as laboratorians be prepared for these upcoming changes?
Well, again, I think everyone needs to fully educate themselves as to the contents of these draft documents. I think they need to read them fairly closely. There were some things that came out, for example, in the workshop that I attended that honestly had escaped me despite the fact that I've read them several times. And I've gone back since and reread them. So people do need to become educated as to what is in the draft document, and then I think they need to be prepared to provide comments, to get engaged, to actually sit down and think about what this means to their own laboratory were these to be implemented.
Great. Well, Catherine, thank you very much for taking the time, and I appreciate your helpful input.
All right, you're very welcome.
Welcome to this section of the Cycle 360 podcast. In this section, I'll be interviewing Christopher McCudden, clinical biochemist at the Ottawa Hospital. Chris is also assistant professor of pathology and laboratory medicine. In this section, we will be discussing the AACC Informatics Division reboot. Chris, thank you for agreeing to be part of Cycle 360.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate the invitation.
So Chris, I'm just going to ask a few questions about the AACC Informatics Division. So, in the past year, the Informatics Division of the AACC has been renamed from the Laboratory Information Systems and Medical Informatics, or LISMI Division. What spurred this rebranding of the division?
Well, the basis for the name change was really to capture some of the range and diversity of interests of the division membership. We want to deal with laboratory informatics and medical informatics, but we also want the division to expand its scope into bioinformatics. Well, this division, at least as I understand it, sort of evolved to address the basic needs of implementing an LIS. These systems are really accepted today as a reality, and so today our collective goals are really to reap, analyze, and aggregate information from an LIS as well as other information sources. I think most laboratory people agree that we should view ourselves as providers of information rather than people who simply run a lab test providing a number. And with all of that comes a whole host of challenges and really amazing opportunities. So we collectively figure the term informatics broadly accounts for all these different activities that the division wants to support. I should say that all the credit for the name change really goes to the executive committee, who as a group came up with this and then very quickly agreed to that change.
So you mentioned the goals of the division. Could you share with the listeners the global aims of the Informatics Division?
Sure. The division is really, as we see it, central to many of the activities of the other divisions. I mean, consider management, translational sciences, proteomics, and metabolomics, and then personalized medicine. Essentially, any question that you want to ask that involves using the LIS or electronic health record, or even the digital data set of any sort, involves informatics. And so we see the informatics division as the glue between all the different activities that we do as laboratorians. And we did define a specific set of goals with all this in mind. So really we want to help people get the most out of their information system and use innovative ways to enhance patient care. So not just pulling a number out of there, but really getting information out of their system. We want to help people use what we define as data science to enhance their quality management. So data science is all the tools and software and analytic approaches to analyzing that data, again, to reap information. And then really prepare people for some of the advances that are coming in that'll help deliver what we do in a different way. So keep people abreast of maybe some of the connectivity and the new advances that are going on. I think a lot of these were highlighted at last year's AACC annual meeting. So essentially, we want to facilitate you getting the most out of the information that we provide, and whether that's getting insight into how your own institute does things, or whether that's letting you know what's happening in the field and how to take advantages of some of the opportunities.
Excellent. So what kind of educational offerings do the division members have access to with the informatics division? Are we producing newsletters, or are there other kind of learning opportunities?
Well, this actually gives me a chance to highlight some of the work that you've done. This division just released its first, what we refer to as a bite, and a bite is a short presentation on an informatics topic, and the first of these is on patient moving averages. And of course, as you know, in this area, it's been certainly recently risen back to the surface as an effort to enhance quality control. So we plan on releasing 2 of these bites every year, and really encourage people to watch Mark's presentation, which can be found through the AACC community artery. And it's very well done, and you can imagine the AACC staff have done really a nice job putting together the production as well. So that's one of them. We also have a few initiatives going besides the bites. One of these will be in Atlanta at our annual AACC meeting, where we've partnered with the Liposciences and Vascular Sciences division for a dinner presentation. We've invited Chris Nogler, who's from the University of Calgary, and he's going to discuss how his team used informatics to determine that fasting had a really limited impact on lipid results. And a lot of people are using this information to change the requirements for fasting for lipid sample collection. He has a number of other examples of using informatics to answer lab questions as well. We're also going to take a page out of some of the other divisions and host a poster tour. So we're going to highlight some of the interesting abstracts in the field through the poster session. And we're also updating, there's an LIS certificate program that's offered through the AACC, and this course provides a whole wealth of information about how lab information systems work. As you can imagine, this field's changing quite quickly, so there's some updates that we want to do. All of this stuff is really outlined in our newsletter, and we released our first one in December, and we hope to plan on releasing 2 per year to highlight all the activities we're doing. And within the newsletter is also some articles and presentations that are relative to the field. I should also mention that division members, we actually have unique access to a division-specific forum, again on the AACC community artery, and we post this information there. And I think this will serve as a really useful tool to share information as well as communicating, really replacing the old listserv technology. Anyway, I encourage everyone to visit the community pages and the AACC artery to get access to all this information.
All right, Chris, thank you very much. Being that this is a podcast, we'll keep this short. And I encourage everyone listening to go ahead and use the link that I've included in the slides to go to the informatics community page on aacc.org.